from monsters and ghosts to otherworldly beings. Join the Explorers as they venture into the darkest realms, seeking the truth to what goes bump in the night.
It's summertime. You've decided to take a nice peaceful walk on the battlefields of Gettysburg. When all of a sudden a storm seems to be kicking up. And in your haste to get out of the rain, you seem to have lost your trail back to the parking area. When you turn around and suddenly see a reenactor dressed in 1800s garb, and without saying a word he points and says what you're looking for is over there. As you turn to look, you find the opening to the trail back to the parking area, and as you turn back to thank him, he has disappeared. Where could he have possibly went? It couldn't possibly be the ghost of John L. Burns, could it?
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Explorers, Seekers of the Truth. I'm Les Cabbage. Joined with me tonight is, and as every night, is my co-host, Chad Charlesworth. And tonight we're joined by, it's a trio tonight. We're joined by a friend of ours, Mr. Neil Smith, who is not just a friend. He's a fellow researcher in the paranormal. He's also interested in the cryptozoological world. And he is also a Civil War reenactor. And that kind of segues into our show topic tonight. We're going to be talking about the ghosts of Gettysburg and the ghosts of the battles of Gettysburg. And I was just informed it was a 3-day battle, not a 3-year battle, as I had. Thank you for clarifying that. So I guess I'm going to let Chad take over here. He's this is kind of your baby. This is your specialty here. You want to talk about what we're going to be talking about tonight?
Yeah, well, thank you, Les, and welcome, Neil. I'm glad to have you here with us tonight. Basically, tonight we're going to cover, folks, 3 of the biggest haunted attractions, basically, in Gettysburg. Notice, folks, I did say attractions because these are all money-making places. You have the Jenny Wade House, the Gettysburg Orphanage, which is now the Soldiers Museum, and the Farnsworth, which is a beautiful restaurant, great place to eat.
Mm-hmm, indeed.
They should sponsor us.
Yeah, right. We need money.
So, you got to also realize that there's a lot of history of Gettysburg that doesn't revolve around the Civil War. Mm-hmm. There is, countless stories of Indian battles out on the battlefields, where they even mention in their folklore brother fighting brother. Mm-hmm. And later this is a term coined for the Civil War because you have people from both sides, cousins, brothers, just happen to live on the other side of a line. They fought for the other side.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't some northern siblings or people, for that matter, choose to fight for the South? It wasn't just South versus the North. Some people, if they agreed with the terms of whichever side of the line, they would go that way. Oh yeah, Les.
You got to realize that the commander of the Vicksburg garrison that Ulysses S. Grant eventually strangled into giving up was from Pennsylvania. Mm. One of the guys that we'll be talking about tonight, one of the Culps, famous Culps Hill in Gettysburg, is from Gettysburg, fought for Virginia during the Civil War. So you have people.
You also had the Hancock-Armistead relationship. They actually were in the army together until the war broke out, and then they were actually on opposite sides.
Yeah, you do have a lot of connections when you look at a lot of the generals and the higher staff officers. They had served in the U.S. military together. So a lot of them had, been in the Mexican War together. So you have somebody who is basically your brother. They're fighting in a trench with you, fighting through fields, and now all of a sudden there's this, you're from Georgia, I'm from Pennsylvania. Well, now we're on opposite sides.
Yeah.
So you do have a lot of that there.
Well, aside from the war itself, I guess we don't want to talk so much about the goings on for the living. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this here. Let's talk about the unliving, the dead side, I guess is the worst way of me saying it.
Okay. Well, let's get into Mary Virginia Wade.
Okay.
or as everybody commonly knows her, Ginny Wade.
Mm-hmm.
Basic story is she was a seamstress, worked with her mom. Her sister had a baby, I think it was like 4 days before the battle begins.
Mm-hmm.
The mom is down helping the sister with the baby. Jenny comes down with the brothers because the battle is raging above where they live, so they moved further away from it. Well, as the Union Army gets defeated on the first day, they fall back right past the house where they're staying.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're in what they consider in Gettysburg, you always hear about no man's land. It's the area between the Union Army and the Confederate Army. So you have armies on both sides of this house randomly shooting at each other, basically.
So they're in the midst of the crossfire and pretty much all the mayhem.
Yeah. It's not a safe place to be at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's ever seen it, the big hotel was not next to it when it happened,
Yeah,
so
course.
there's no barricade for bullets.
Thanks
Yeah.
for bursting my bubble, Chad.
Yeah, right.
Yes, Neil, the 1863 Holiday Inn was not there. So, and the story of Jenny, basically, I think, honestly, the current story of Jenny Wade is a manifestation of the town.
It's basically a romance story that was concocted.
They created a romance story to make this, being the only female casualty at the battle.
Right. And I guess in a way to soften the evils of the war, I guess you could say.
Well, yeah. I mean, they had I believe they reconstructed some history, to make her sound like this pure, innocent dove who was engaged to be married and is struck down in the prime of her life. I mean, she died at 20 years old.
Yeah.
But I do believe that from the older historians to the newer people telling these stories, her lifestyle seems to have changed a little.
Yeah. It's
mean-
not this Romeo and Juliet story people think.
Yeah, because, I mean, the stories I was told, now I'm going back into the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
There was a reason why they called her Ginny.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just short for Virginia, which is, a common thing people used back then. She was a comfort girl, basically, at a few of the local taverns.
Oh, so it's more like Romeo and the Cheap Whore.
Yeah, I mean, and not to, be critical of this. And again, these people could have been wrong.
Yeah.
The current people could be 100% right. But the stories from back then, she wasn't this innocent white little dove that struck down in the prime of her life.
Yeah.
She was a comfort girl.
Yeah.
And, this Jack Skelly story that goes into her being engaged to Jack Skelly and the one Colt boy being involved in passing messages. He died the third day of the battle also.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Skelly died the 12th of July. The 3rd of July was the end of the battle. She dies the 3rd. He dies around, Neil, am I mistaken, the 3rd day or first day? Okay, around the first day. So, there's this big love triangle story that they go into that, Jack Skelly is wounded at the Battle of Winchester. He's engaged to Ginny Wade. He gives messages to Culp, who's in the Army of Northern Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
to deliver to her, once they get north. According to the story, Culp goes to the house that's actually Ginny Wade's house, which is not the house at the end of town. It's a house further up on the road.
Uh-huh.
Knocks on the door, nobody's there. So he moves in with his unit, and they move out. So he never delivers these messages.
Hmm.
So that's one of the stories of the tragic love story of Ginny Wade.
I prefer the dirty whore, to be, in my honest opinion.
Well, I like a dirty girl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's a war. People are dying. What better way to go out than to get a dirty whore before you're,
Well, you also got to realize, like,
kind of last hurrah
you got to realize, like,
all over her face.
it's not
Continue.
it's not uncommon back then for husbands to pimp out their wives.
Yeah.
Wyatt Earp, Virgil Earp, all the Earps. You always see in the movie, one point where Stephen Lang says to Samuel Elliott, who's
Mhm.
playing Virgil Earp, "I'll cut your pimp heart out."
Yeah.
It's because Virgil Earp pimped out his wife. It wasn't an uncommon practice for normal girls to be prostitutes to make money to support their family.
Right.
So the idea of her being a comfort girl at these bars and these taverns does not seem that far off.
Yeah.
It seems a little more far off that she's this seamstress who's this, pure angelic figure, and everybody thinks she's just this good girl. Now, of course, folks, you understand we probably will be doing an investigation there sooner or later. And I'm sure we'll be
absolutely.
We'll be
now,
into
we've been there
stuff.
before. We've investigated there before. We investigated with Prey Paranormal, which is now our newly resurrected team. Neil and I were part of that, and Chad is now in or has recently been inducted into the team, and we're trying to get that back up off the ground because we had a lot of fun doing that. But we've investigated there before. I've investigated it. The Jenny Wade house many times in the past on my own and with other friends and stuff. I know the two of you have been down there a lot as well. So we kind of have the backstory here or two variations of. Let's talk about the actual ghost story now. We have the love story. We have the dirty story. Now let's hear about the ghost story.
I prefer talking about the dirty story. No, I mean, if anybody's watched Ghost Adventures, Ghost Lab, Ghost Hunters, Haunted History on, I believe it's History 2, they've all covered the Jenny Wade house.
Right.
You go anywhere from moving objects, noises, footsteps, orbs, voices, the scent of baking bread in the kitchen, is where she was shot and killed, was in the kitchen while making loaves of bread. Finally, to full body apparitions. Now, one of the stories I remember from back in about 99, maybe 2000, was we were attending an evening tour of the Jenny Wade house. Back then, they used to have those white chains that you buy at any hardware store, the white plastic chains on two pillars were basically her final resting place.
Right.
And one of the things that happened was you're sitting there, the tour guide gives the end of his tour, and you sit there, and you're allowed to take pictures and allowed to ask questions of the tour guide. Well, he goes over by the stairs and everything. He's not right by the bed. And all of a sudden, the chains start rattling. Now, nobody is standing by these chains. These chains on their own just start rattling. And basically, the guy gives a little, oh, yeah, this happens every so often. I come to know the guy a little bit from talking to him. And basically what I got from him was the story of what they feel is it's her dad. Her dad never knew she died.
Right.
Until a long time after. Basically, you see it reported now, he was in a mental institution. He wasn't in a mental institution. He was in an almshouse, which doubles as a mental institution later. But he was more or less a debtor. He didn't pay his debts, so they put him in there. He was an alcoholic. So they basically say that's her dad. Now, if you notice, I don't know if any of you guys have been there recently, the chains are gone.
Oh, really?
They've removed the chains, so that no longer happens.
Which one thing with that is, it's interesting that they would move, because now, if anybody who's familiar with that, they have chains in the upper levels of the house, like on the second floor in the one bedroom. Now, I could see how they would move just by the virtue of there's so many people moving around. It's an old home. Could be the wooden floors shifting. So, okay, I get that. It could be somebody passing by, But in the basement in her final resting place is a solid stone floor or concrete floor. I think it used to be dirt, and I think they...
It was dirt at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was dirt.
Whether dirt or concrete or whatnot, it's a solid floor. It's not like you're going to be walking around and it's going to shake because of your footprints or your steps. Although, if you could walk past it, it could be just shifting from, you passing by the chain, but you don't typically get close enough to make that chain move. Could it be a draft coming in through the doorway? I don't know.
From seeing it, I don't think it was a draft. Because it wasn't one of those gently swaying, wind hits something, it just pushes it a little bit, and it sways back and forth. This was to the point of somebody grabbing it and doing the Ultimate Warrior on the top row.
Wow.
It's vibrating. It's not swaying, as I use a hand motion for radio folks. It's not swaying back and forth like something blowing in a breeze. It's going up and down.
Right.
It's rattling. It's not just swinging back and forth. It's like rattle.
Okay, because I was going to say, if it were just a simple swaying, I mean, there's so many ways that you could debunk that. But if it's like violently shaking and to the point where it's not like a natural occurrence, that would raise a question as to what it could be.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I don't know if it was a ghost or...
You mean a ghost?
I went to do that first time. Yeah, I mean, it could have been a ghost.
Inside joke, folks.
But it could have just been something they set up to further people to come there. Because remember, this wasn't a ghost tour. This was the basic house tour.
Yeah, this is before ghost tours became popular.
Oh my God, this was back when there was 2 ghost tours in the entire town.
Yeah.
I believe it was Black Cat and Mark Nesbitt. They were the only 2 at that point. It wasn't every other building had a ghost tour.
Well, we were down there just 2 years ago, and I mean, we couldn't walk half a block without somebody handing out a flyer saying, "Come out and check out our haunted tour."
Oh
Yeah.
You know
yeah,
what I mean? And
yeah. You make the turn at Steinwert and start walking down that street, and it's every other store has a ghost tour, and if they don't have a ghost tour, they sell tickets for one of the other ghost tour places.
Yeah. They pimp each other's business out, which I mean, it's understandable because of the history of the place. It's money, and everybody's going to do what they can to make money. However, I do believe, aside from all the what's the word I'm looking for, the advertised fronts, like all the advertised ghosts. With the history of that place, there has got to be restless souls out there that are legitimately haunting the grounds. And Neil, maybe you could kind of talk to us a little bit about some of your experiences during the reenactments. Did you pick up any stories while you were reenacting about ghost regiments or anything like that?
well, a lot of times when I've been down there, we'll go ahead and do the reenactment, and then when everything shuts down for the night, we'll go out and check out a couple of places in Gettysburg. We've actually, I've had experiences with. There's a bridge there where they believe some Confederate soldiers were hung.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard swaying, as if the bodies were swinging from the.
Is that
from the bridge.
Satches covered bridge or what?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard stories. I've never actually been there myself.
Well, when we were down there, we were supposed to check that out, but I don't think we were able to find it.
No, well, I think we got sidetracked as well. But
Pings, I believe, sidetracked us.
It was a place
Yeah,
called
for
Ping.
anybody who goes down to Gettysburg, do not eat at Ping's Chinese restaurant. Although, fortunately for myself, I was not affected quite as bad as my other
It
researchers.
was devastating. It took our entire front line out. We were done. But,
We were pinged.
yes, but yeah, I've had experiences down there, and I think the best one for me was actually seeing an apparition early in the morning. We got up. I got up early to go use the bathroom because that place gets pretty crowded. And as I'm walking across the field, there's a little bit of a fog mist going on, but as I'm walking across the field, I looked, out of my peripheral vision, and I thought I was seeing another reenactor 100 yards or so to my left, just walking to the bathrooms as well. And I looked back again, and he was still there for a little bit. And then I looked down at my shoes for a second, looked back over, and he had totally disappeared. And
Now, was he in an area that he could have easily had ducked behind a tree or something?
no,
Or
this is a wide open field, just heading down to the porta-johns that they had there. But yeah, there was nowhere unless a sinkhole popped up and he actually fell in it. I don't know what else would have happened to him. So,
That's
but
awesome.
yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that there has to be restless spirits in Gettysburg. I mean, you don't have between 51 and 55,000 people die in a
concentrated area?
matter of a couple of miles and not have some kind of residual energy left over.
Right.
There's the 2 brothers from Ghost Lab. I mean,
The Kling brothers.
the Kling
or whatever,
brothers, yeah. You have their videotape from back in the 80s that was shot on an old camcorder.
Mhm.
To me, those are full body apparitions marching in a field. To the point of when they stop and go to record it, they're gone. But I mean, I've seen stuff in Gettysburg that makes you think there has to be something here.
Yeah.
I've seen when you get down into where the run is, where the soldiers were pulling themselves down into this little valley where a stream runs to hide away from the bullets that were flying over them. I've been standing there at times with my nephews, and my one nephew and I are looking at the side where the hospital is, and we're both staring at something, and I look over, and I look at him, and I'm like, get your camera and take a picture. And by the time we take the picture, there's nothing but, some blurry smoke in the image, but to both of us, it looked like somebody laying shot on the hill coming down to the run. So, I've seen other things like at the Farnsworth that I'll get into later that would make me believe, there's definitely spirit activity in Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Again, like I've always said, follow the money. There's money to be made with the spirit activity.
Yeah.
But speaking of money to be made, we're going to take a small break now to let one of our sponsors give you some information. Hello, and welcome back to Explorers, Seekers of the Truth, Ghost of Gettysburg. Neil, we were talking in the break, and you kind of brought up a really cool point about the energy of the town of Gettysburg. Maybe you could get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I was just talking a little bit about, even before I was into the paranormal, just as a history nut and a reenactor, there was always an energy to Gettysburg that you could feel just before you enter the town. It's almost like going through like a bubble of time. Like you enter into this whole world, and there's this. It's not a creepy feeling, not an evil feeling. It's very. It's just this energy that lets you know that something big happened there. Something big has transpired there historically.
Yeah, I always kind of get that feeling of it's like a reflective energy. Like you see the signs for Gettysburg on the highway, and as you get closer, you start to feel it more and more. And then when you get off the highway and you start making the turn, going into town, it's like you start to reflect. There's somberness, there is happiness, there's joy. It's all these
It's
emotions.
an eclectic,
yeah,
grouping of feelings. Yeah, I agree too. When we went down there to investigate a couple years ago, I remember I didn't even know we were in Gettysburg, but you just felt like this. It was like a surge of energy, just like it's hard to explain. Almost like a mild electricity that kind of goes through you, and like you said, it's like a reflection of a multitude of emotions that you just start to almost have flash in front of you.
Yeah.
And almost like you feel it too.
Yeah, you definitely get into an awe of everything that went on there. But I mean, it depends which way you come into town. Like I've come in through the farmlands that would have been the route the Confederate Army came through in. And you just start to look and you start to see those fields, and you can just start to picture people marching, hundreds of miles away from home in enemy territory. And you just have this this feeling, and
it's like you're transported back.
Yeah. And I mean, you go to Devil's Den and sit at Devil's Den, it washes over you.
The triangular battlefield as well. Right behind Devil's Den.
Yeah. Yeah, certain spots on that field. I mean, I've even stood up on, at the monuments at the angle and stuff like that, and have been moved to tears just sitting there by myself.
Yeah.
Like nothing going on, middle of spring. There's probably 4 other people on the battlefield. You're sitting there, and I mean, I've just started bawling at times. And it's just, and it wasn't like a sad bawling. It was a mix of sad and
remorse.
Yeah. It's a weird, you get hit with so many emotions when you're there. And yeah, it's not a creepy or scary feeling ever.
Yeah.
It's just very surreal to me I know the first time that I went to Gettysburg, I felt it, and it wasn't that I even knew that much about history, but there's this surreal mood, somberness to the whole place, and there's an awesomeness to it as well. When you actually get out and see some of the battlefield, when you're kind of walking around out there and you see the different monuments dedicated to the different units that fought there, there's this overwhelming feeling of awesomeness of what really took place there. And I think it has manifested itself in a lot of ways into the paranormal world as well, because I think there's no way that, given all the bloodshed that happened there, all the turmoil, people's lives cut short, that there's not some type of paranormal activity there. And
Right.
it could be, residual, obviously, but it's there.
Yeah, I agree. That's very well said too. Like you coined the awesomeness. Like it's an overpowering, overwhelming sensation. It's just very weird.
Yeah, and it's not like you can put any one emotion out there and say that is it. It's sadness, it's happiness, it's this. It is an awesomeness. It is a truly just awe-inspiring feeling that you get there.
And I think a lot of even the terrain too is just very different down there as opposed to a lot of other areas in Pennsylvania. Like to me anyway, like Devil's Den, that cluster of stone. Now, granted, the battlefield was much different when the war was being fought. It wasn't landscaped or groomed the way it is now. It wasn't wide open the way it is now. But that cluster of stones, like it's just very weird how they're just kind of like placed there. It's bizarre.
Well, it's actually volcanic stone.
Is it? I was going to say, it looked almost like giant sandstone or something.
It's actually volcanic rock. A lot of people always try to say, oh, it's granite, it's this, it's that. It's actually volcanic rock. There's a fault line, I guess, basically runs through the center of that battlefield. Thankfully, has not had any issues of movement in thousands of years. But yeah, there is actually a line that runs through there that has volcanic possibility to it.
Well, that could possibly explain that sense of that energy, because the fault lines and parallels and all that, they're known to hold that psychic energy in a way, or
Yeah. Well, you also got to look at I think the best explanation I've ever had for it was, they always say energy cannot be created nor can it be destroyed. It's got to continue on in some form. Okay, well, picture this, folks. You are charging into a position of cannons. Now, I don't know if you understand what a cannon does to the human body when it hits it, because we're not just talking about somebody firing a cannonball. It's not a cartoon where you catch it. If anybody's seen the movie The Patriot, a regular cannonball bounces and it tears apart whatever it hits. But now you're firing grape shot, which is a bunch of little ball bearings. Basically a shotgun shell fired out of a cannon. Now you're charged in that position. Now think about your emotions. You're fighting somebody. Now you may not hate the person, but you're fighting. So natural instinct is you have to have the willingness to kill that person. And they have the willingness to kill you. So there is a hatred there. So you're charging this, and all of a sudden that guy pulls the fire, and boom, you're dead.
You don't even see it coming.
You don't even know it happened. You're a mist in the air at this point. Where does that energy go?
It keeps fighting.
Yeah. I mean, where does it go? It's obliterated the body. The shell of the organism is gone. Where does the energy go? And that's one of the things. It was like the best explanation I ever got from anybody on why some of those areas may be haunted. Is that energy has to do something. Is it stuck in time and it just repeats that act? Is it able to continue on in some form of life on the other side?
Well, we're talking about the Devil's Den and the triangular battlefield. When we were down there a couple of years ago with the Prey team, we found help me out here, Neil. Who was the one? What side was marching down in that area that we were?
Well, that would have been where the Confederates were at the time.
And I think you said they were the ones that came up from Texas.
Well, they were all over the region.
All over the place.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a lot of units from like Alabama and Mississippi. There was just about everybody there. They had almost their whole army up there at that point.
And they traveled great distances. So, and I think we talked about this when we were down there. Their, uniforms or whatever you want to call it, their boots and stuff like that, the stuff that they carried with them and the stuff that they had worn was wearing out. And a lot of them, by the time they reached Gettysburg, they didn't even have shoes because everything was so just blown out from the marching such great distances, especially the teams that came up from from Texas and the Deep South.
A lot of those places, a lot of those guys actually just threw their stuff off to the side and only carried their rifle because they were so tired from marching that they actually couldn't even carry the stuff. Yeah. They didn't even have a lot of food. A lot of the reason that they actually moved up north was to try to get some food at that point.
Well, when we were down there, an interesting topic or point here. When we were down in the lower end of the triangular battlefield where there's a cluster of trees, there's a little path that runs through the middle. And we went down there, and it was probably, I want to say it was in March, wasn't it? Yeah, it was like the tail end of March. And that day we were there was a pretty warm day and unseasonably warm, I think, for March. But the day before that and weeks before that, it was bitter, bitter cold. But when we went down there, we hit that portion of the field fairly early in the morning. I mean, before the big crowds were hitting there. And as we were walking through this trail, there was a big mud puddle. And off to the front and back of the mud puddle, we found a series of human footprints, like barefoot footprints, walking through this mud puddle. And we were kind of like, wow, that's bizarre, because it didn't walk around, which it easily could have. It was footprints that walked straight through this puddle. And we were all thinking to ourselves, what idiot would walk through a freezing cold puddle in March? And like I said, the days prior to that one particular day were very, very, very cold.
Yeah, the definition of the footprint was really nice.
It was remarkable.
It was clear. Well, if that would have been done, several months ago, or even prior, the prior summer, that would have worn away easily.
Absolutely, yeah. Even if it were a few days old, it wouldn't have had such clear definition. It looked almost like it happened while we approached, like immediately. It was such perfect. You could almost see the rings of the prints, like the toe prints and stuff.
Well, that is interesting, because there are Bigfoot reportings from down that way too.
That was all joking aside, though. No, that was my first thought. I'm like, holy crap! Did I just find a Sasquatch print? But it was definitely human. But still, what the hell was somebody doing walking around? And this is like an old dirt path. There were branches laying all over it. There were rocks, and I mean, it's not a trail that one would just want to casually stroll along barefoot in the tail end of winter. It was just very strange. And you want to elaborate a little bit on some of the other things that we found there, Neil, like the EVPs?
Yeah, we had I'll tell you what, the first 10 minutes of that was just crazy from an EVP standpoint. We had sounds of things that sounded like horses, things that sounded like the reins on horses, as they're moving. And I know that there are horse tours that go through there, but this was prior to anyone being there.
And there were no horses anywhere around.
We heard things that almost sounded like metal, sonar type of sounds.
Yeah, some of them sound like clanking of maybe a mess kit or something.
And I asked the question, which general do you serve? And I got an EVP response that said General Lee.
I remember that. That was and clear as day too. And the one sound that you had mentioned, Neil, that still perplexes me to this day is it was almost like a sonar, plucking of a banjo string, but it was like a sonar sound. It was like this, just very, very bizarre. I can't replicate it. But I don't know where it would have come from.
Could it have been a dying giraffe?
It could have been a dying giraffe.
I mean, if you hear the sound of a dying giraffe, you would know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody knows the sound of a dying giraffe.
Can you do a dying giraffe right now, Les?
Wah!
Yes, a South Park reference for any children out there.
Just one more thing about the path that we were talking about. This isn't like a path that even I would say normal tourists would go on. This was something that experienced historians or people who are familiar with the battlefield would have probably taken, because it was covered in weeds for the most part. There were some clear areas, but it was definitely an area where
yeah, it's definitely not. It was off the beaten path.
Yeah.
It was definitely not a well-worn trail at all. But it was just bizarre that we would find footprints through this section.
Were there any ticks, Neil?
I got a tick problem, man.
I had to bring it up.
I got a phobia about ticks, man. They make fun of me in the reenacting unit because I actually wear anti-tick garb underneath my uniform.
So you're not.
I don't blame you. I wouldn't want Lyme disease.
You're not 100% authentic while you're out there.
No.
You mean you've bathed the century?
After they make fun of me for wearing a tick suit, I go over to my rustic-looking cooler and pull out a Miller Lite.
Yeah, right.
Well, that always works. I mean, if you're not going to go 100%, you might as well go with the Miller.
That's right.
Because there's no better time than right now for Miller time.
So what's the next topic that we want to discuss?
Oh, are we still talking about this?
Oh, we're going to get back on track.
I'm
here.
sorry. The next topic is the orphanage.
Mhm.
And again, that's another one that has been seen on every television show.
Which is a very macabre history with that orphanage.
Yeah, and this is actually like a post Battle of Gettysburg story. But the tie to the Battle of Gettysburg is basically the first head of it is one of the casualties of Gettysburg's wife. The story, he was a sergeant in the 154th New York. His name was Amos, and I'm going to butcher this last one, Humiston?
You know what? I'm going to have to pass on that.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, it's the story that they've covered now with the man who dies on the first day of the battle, and he's clutching the picture of three children, a plate picture of three children, and basically a little girl finds his body with the, after the battle, finds him holding this picture, and the picture gets posted in the newspapers, gets circulated to different newspapers, because they're trying to identify the man. They're trying to identify through the children who this man could have been. It turns out it's a sergeant from New York. His wife is brought in, and their three children are brought into Gettysburg, and she's the first head mistress of the Gettysburg orphanage.
Yeah.
Well, she helped raise around 60 kids from 11 different states, and basically all those children always said, how much love she had for every kid that was there. Every kid that passed through those doors was treated like one of her own children. Something happened. She has to move away. They hire this lady named Rosa Carmichaels to take over. Well, she's just an animal. She's a savage. Things that they've confirmed that she has done, that she was tried in court for: beating, torturing, tying children up in the basement to leave them to die, tying them up in outhouses. Basically had the basement turned into a dungeon. Chains on the walls, and she would chain children up and just let them there. She would chain them to the fence outside and in the hot sun and just let them chain to the fence. Now you say, oh, how could she do that? How could she do that? Well, the next door neighbor at the time is the Evergreen Cemetery. There's
Nobody's seeing it.
Yeah, there's no house right next door at this point, so there's nobody that can say, hey, why does she have these children hooked to a fence?
Right.
So yeah, she basically takes over the orphanage, and basically after her it closes, and it's vacant until the 1950s when it becomes a museum. So she, some of the activity there, to get into that part of it, you get the disembodied children's voices. You get people physically being touched. You get doors being opened and closed. Now, I've been privy to the surveillance system that's in there, and they have probably hours of video of doors just randomly, slowly opening, slowly closing, slamming, flying open, slamming closed. People who work there, basically everybody that works there does before they go downstairs to lock up at night, they basically ask, permission to go down there, and they basically state so Rosa doesn't slam the door and hold it closed, because there are people that have worked there who have been trapped in the basement for hours and have not been able to get out. They've been interviewed. They've went back and watched their surveillance tape with the person going down the steps, the door's open, and they're downstairs, and you can see the light go out downstairs, and you figure they're coming back up the steps, and the door is slammed closed in their face. So, you get a lot of that. You get some attachments. My wife experienced what, to my best knowledge, was an attachment. She had worked with children, special needs children, and stuff like that. We're in there, she starts feeling nauseous. She's sick. She's starting to get pale. Only when she goes to the back of the store, though. Back where the displays and all are for their little museum and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she gets pale as could be. She's nauseous. We leave. We're walking down the street, and I finally just turned to her and said, "You got to tell it to go back."
Yeah.
And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, evidently Hutch has come with us." Basically, Hutch is what people would know as the stick boy if they watch television. On the Ghost of
what does stick boy mean?
He was the boy that beat the children.
With a stick, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's I think Zach Bagans, and then tried to provoke him. The best explanation I
Did
have.
Zach try and steal his shirt?
Yeah, I think actually they both went to Baby Gap that weekend.
Okay.
No offense, Zach. Just in case you picked the show up later. I think he tried to provoke him. What people don't understand, this is something I got from a lady who's worked there for years and has to deal with these entities on a day-to-day basis, is you've got to realize Hutch is not a bad person.
Mm.
From everybody who's worked there, who's interacted with him and has felt his presence, he's a 16-year-old boy who was beaten, who was, sodomized. And his only way of stopping that from happening to him
Was to do it to
was
others.
to do it for her to other people. So he becomes known as the stick boy. He was basically the disciplinarian that was, she would be the one who would decide the punishment. He was the one that had to carry it out.
Mm.
So he, from what I've dealt with people there and researching it, he is a misunderstood spirit. These people go in there thinking he's this horrible creature who is beating people. Well, he is only doing this to protect himself.
Right.
He's doing this so it doesn't happen to him. Is it right? No. But at that point, you're a child. You're an orphan child. You don't have a family. Who's going to believe you? Now, luckily, some children escaped from there, and this is how it ended up getting shut down. Children escaped and started telling these wild stories about the beatings, the tortures, and one girl who had actually escaped had burn marks. And she told the story how she got the burn marks, and they finally figured out that we need to investigate this woman.
Right.
And the funny thing is there's not much known of her before she comes to Gettysburg and becomes the head mistress of this orphanage. And for the most part, past her arrest in Gettysburg, there's no history of her after this. She kind of just disappears. She shows up one day, and a few years down the road, she's gone. And she doesn't show up anywhere else in records, of other towns. I mean, she was only charged $20 for beating and torturing and killing children. And it goes back to her being a woman, and back then you couldn't charge a woman like you could charge a man. So, that's a lot of the background story on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Neil has anything to add on the orphanage.
No, I think you covered that quite comprehensively there.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand is it's not this horrible, she is horrible. She is there yet. She is there. She is the malicious one. She's the one that will push you, pull your hair, smack you, torture you while you're there. Hutch is a little kid. He, from what I understand and from what I've seen from talking to people that work there who have had the similar situation to my wife where they've gotten sick as could be, left there and still were sick, and 10 minutes later I tell her, like I said, I was telling the story, I tell her to tell it to go back. Tell Hutch that you can't help him. He has to go back. And I forget the lady's name that was working that night. To her, and she is going to try to help him the best she can. And she tells him this, and instantly feels better. Like the weight was lifted off of her. She doesn't feel nauseous anymore.
Wasn't that when you got that funky picture?
Yeah, I pulled out my iPhone and went to take a picture of her. Did not have my finger on the screen at all, and it took a blurry image, which I'll include in the video that goes for the YouTube version of this. I took a picture, which without taking a picture, I didn't touch the button to take it on my iPhone. It took itself. She is all blurry and distorted.
But everything else was crystal clear.
For the most part, yeah. And after we do this, take another picture in the same exact spot, same pose, basically, and the picture, crystal clear, you can see my beautiful wife in it.
Yeah.
The picture before that, it is distorted as could be. And like I said, I didn't actually try to snap the picture. I was pulling the phone out of my pocket. I don't even know how I got the picture taken. By the time I got it up, it was already up on my screen that I had taken a picture.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a picture of like the ground, coming up. It was an actual, like, I was holding the camera out in front of me and took this picture.
Yeah, I saw them. And that was very bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, and after that, after telling, Hutch that he had to go back, she felt fine.
Mm-hmm.
She went from nauseous, and first of all, you got to understand, my wife is not involved in the paranormal like we are. She's not into any of this. She avoids going to anything that is scarier than a ghost tour, walking through the streets of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
She doesn't do any of this stuff. She doesn't go out with us when we go out to do research. I go there to do research. She goes, and does other stuff and lets me go walk around for a while. She's
You're
not
so lucky.
I know. I have the greatest wife in the world. So I'm not involved. She's not involved with that part of it. So she's not into this. She's not going in there going, oh, I know what to say or what what to do. I mean, she don't even watch Ghosts and Adventurers with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She's not into this. So for her to come out, for her in the front of the store, perfectly fine, goes to the back of the store. And if you've ever seen, I'll include some photos, folks. They have a section where they have the novelty store stuff, and they have this little seating area where they kind of give you the tours and sit you down and tell you the story, and then they take you throughout the building. As soon as she got back by that doorway, you could see the color in her drained.
Yeah.
And, I don't feel good. I feel nauseous. She comes to the front of the store, and you can see her kind of like pep up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was talking to the lady at the counter. She goes back to the back again. Color's gone. She's like, sick.
Yeah.
Like about to vomit, sick. Take her outside. She's still like this. Now I'm thinking, what is it? Is she getting sick or something like that? And finally, I'm just like, you know what? It just seems so odd that we go in there, this happens, we come out, she's still feeling this way. I'm like, being somebody that's involved in paranormal, I look and go, tell it has to go home. Tell it has to go back. She does that, and all of a sudden she's perfectly fine. Now, is that psychosomatic? It could be, me telling her to do this, and then all of a sudden she feels better. But like I said, she's not into the paranormal, so it's not like she would know a lot about attachments, or even the story of Hutch was, I think, probably the first time she ever heard it was the lady and I talking about it. So
Right.
she doesn't, she's from Texas, folks. She's not from Pennsylvania like the rest of us. She's from south of Waco, Texas. She's not, a big history buff. She's a psychology major, the IO psychology. She's not into ghosts. She's not into Bigfoot. She's not into any of this stuff, really.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very odd that happened.
Right.
Well, they say, sometimes with paranormal energies attaching themselves to people, that even though your wife wasn't into the paranormal, she had a sympathy for what might have been going on there, and an energy might be able to prey on that weakness and kind of attach itself to her based on that. I've known some people and have experienced that myself, and it's you don't necessarily have to be into the paranormal for that to happen.
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of the people that do end up with some sort of attachment with Hutch, it's generally women who neither have experienced similar upbringing, some inappropriate touching by an uncle here or there, and the other people that seem to be affected a lot by it are people that work with children. So he seems to try to attach himself to, and I guess, in all reality is he's looking for the help, to get out of where he is. So he feels these people are advocates for children. They could be his advocate and help him.
Right.
Like I said, I don't think he is a malicious spirit. Now, does he do some stuff once in a while to let himself be known? Yeah. Yeah. He
Well,
does,
he's a kid.
Yeah, he's a mischievous kid. He's not this evil, three-horned satanic demon that sits in a corner.
Too bad.
Damien?
Yeah.
I'm doing this for you, Damien. No, but you know what I mean? Like, he's not this bad thing. And some people go in with that approach of he is this, I'm calling out the stick boy of he's not. He's a child who basically did this to survive.
Yeah.
It's survival mode.
Was there any record as to what happened to him after the...
No, not really. A lot of those children were dispersed in other areas. Like I said, he was already 16 at this point. So
and in those days, he's pretty much an adult.
he's pretty much an adult at this point. You
What
know.
about Rosa herself? I mean, where did they find her at? I mean, and how did she? I mean, I'm just curious. Like, wouldn't she have had some type of reputation? Was this the first time that?
That's 100% good question. That's something I've questioned people on too. Is where does she come from?
Yeah.
You know, is she? You know, there's generally, like, if you look at serial killers, there's always generally these telltale signs, and if you go back and actually look at their history, you see these little incidents that popped up over the years. She does not exist prior to this, and it makes me wonder if it was a fake name. You know, Rosa Carmichael. You know,
Yeah.
Carmichael is a last name. It's been used for years. You know, for somebody to have a Rosa, you know, is that her real name? You know, could she have had 10 other incidents where she had beaten or done stuff to children? Because you generally don't think somebody just comes into town one day, gets this job, and goes, "Okay, this is a really nice place. These children are really nice, and
I'm gonna rape them.
I'm gonna beat every one of them tonight." You know. Yeah, so I like, for the most part, she doesn't exist.
She's like an evil Nanny McPhee.
Yeah.
Comes from nowhere and leaves without a trace.
She's the evil Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Except for, bed knobs and broomsticks are not good things in this story, children.
You will be flogged.
Yeah, I mean, and she disappears basically after after her arrest and her time in jail for this. She disappears. She don't really show up on anything. I don't know of any census records even that she shows up on after this.
Interesting.
Yeah, you got to realize it's 1866, say maybe 1868 at this point, 69 when they finally catch her. You know, she could have moved out west, been on a wagon train that got slaughtered and nobody ever saw him again, disappeared in the woods. You know, or she could have went to the next, down to Virginia and
Changed her name again and
yeah.
and just went on with it.
To Betty Carmichael.
I don't get the reference, but okay. Yes, Les. Betty Crocker. That's her.
Yeah.
Betty
That's
Crocker.
her new name. Betty Crocker. She cooks kids.
Yeah. Nothing says lovin'.
Like a baby in the oven.
Oh God.
What? Too far?
Yeah, I think you crossed the line now.
All right.
This went from a really good show to
I'm gonna take those last 5 minutes back. Put them away. So, anyways, moving on. What's the next topic? We covered the Jenny Wade house. We covered the orphanage, and now we're moving on to
the Farnsworth, or as I like to call it, the Sleepy Hollow Inn. Which is actually the name of it years ago. Was back in the 50s. It was named the Sleepy Hollow Inn, and they have the sign up when you walk into the actual restaurant part of it that says Sleepy Hollow Inn, home of over 400, I think, Civil War bullet holes. Yeah, this you got to understand. This is one of the original houses in town. It was built in 1810, and during the Battle of Gettysburg, it's basically used as a Confederate stronghold.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice brick building. It's one of the only tall structures at this point. It's about 3 stories already at that point.
Yeah.
And basically it becomes a perfect area for sharpshooters.
I want to stop you right there because my question is, and I don't know what the building looked like totally back then, but where some of those shots were fired, I'm not sure those guys were sharpshooters.
Well, yeah, this is where I one of the things I hate about the Jenny Wade story is the bullet that kills Jenny Wade is always attributed to somebody in the attic of the Farnsworth. Now, the guns were capable of shooting that far. It was a pop shot at a soldier who was running by, and it went through one door into through a house and kills her in a room with another door closed.
Yeah.
The Civil War sharpshooters are not the modern day snipers that we think of. Yeah, a lot of them were using smoothbore rifles too. So it's not like you're not even shooting a rifle barrel where it's getting spin as it comes out.
Yeah.
It's coming out of a smooth bore. So it's used as a stronghold for sharpshooters. Again, we're talking about a bunch of guys who, probably were pretty good shots.
Yeah.
Shooting a deer in a field, they developed into good marksmen in the military. Yeah, the term sharpshooter, I think, is kind of, when I think of sharpshooters, I think of like Carlos Havecox, who's a Marine sniper from Vietnam era and 93 confirmed kills. I think of those guys. I don't think of a guy with a smooth bore musket firing, from across town, basically. And like I said, the hotel was not there, folks, so the bullet could technically have went from there.
Yeah.
I dispute the shot came from there. I think the shot came from a lot closer, and I think they were trying to kill her. I don't think they were just shooting at some random guy. I think they were just tired of her making bread. I've
Tired of the whore making bread.
I've worked in a bakery, and the first thing I'd want to do is probably shoot myself if I had that option. So yeah, I mean, So the Farnsworth, get back to that. Basically they're shooting from third floor attic windows, and it's pretty safe for them to be up there shooting at this point in the battle. It's on the register of historic places. I believe all three of the locations we talked about are on that historic. So you can actually look up normal, non-paranormal related information on that part of it. It's now a bed and breakfast. It has 9 rooms, of which 5 of them are reported to be haunted.
Mm-hmm.
There are anywhere, this is coming from the people in the know, between 14 to 16 spirits that occupy this house.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff, like I said, the sharpshooters and stuff like that in the attic. There was also a hospital in the basement. Basement was turned into a makeshift field hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have a lot of people who, basically died in there.
Yeah.
So 14 to 16 spirits in a decent sized brick building. The spirits in the house, I've dealt with probably 2 or 3 of them personally. I've seen random things at that place happen, not attributing them to anybody. The one that everybody really talks about, everybody that hasn't spent a lot of time there talks about, is Mary. She said to basically, and she must have been like a nurse, because she's one of these spirits that seems to come to comfort people who are in need or, dealing with some kind of pain and struggle. And she seems to offer like comfort to them. She makes you feel better when stuff isn't going your way.
Yeah.
One of the other ones, there's a young boy and a father that were hit. The boy dies out front on the street. He's hit by a horse and carriage. Now
Okay. Yeah.
This wasn't. I don't believe this has anything to do with the actual Civil War.
No, this was just
spirit,
a unfortunate casualty.
Yeah, he's hit by a horse and buggy as it goes by, and the father and him are both said to be there grieving. The father's grieving over the loss of his son, and the son's spirit is supposedly said to haunt the grounds in the courtyard and stuff like that. You'll see him.
But doesn't he run through the restaurant portion too and like tug on people and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Wow, getting goosebumps there, huh?
Yeah, I have a lot of stories about the Farnsworth personally. Yeah, I've heard stories about him running around in there. I've never personally seen him running around in there. One of the other spirits that they refer to is Walter.
Now this is the evil one, right?
This is the evil Confederate soldier, dressed in butternut, and he's basically a male chauvinist pig who hates women. The basic story is he's wounded somewhere outside the house. They bring him into the house. Some woman tries to offer comfort to him, tries to give him water, tries to take care of his wounds. And the story says he basically looks at her and said, "I'd rather die than let a woman help me." So I guess he goes on to die because there's no reports of him really. This story, I mean, can be another fabrication of town history.
Right.
So he is said to be this malicious spirit. I don't know if this is attributed to him. My wife and I go to Gettysburg all the time. This is actually while we were dating. She was leaving for a conference in Atlanta the next day, so I had planned the night in Gettysburg where I planned on proposing to her. So there's a small section of the Farnsworth out back where there's these tree. It's like a ivy with all these bird nests hung up on the wall. And this is the spot where she says that she fell in love with me. I thought the day she met
beautiful.
I thought it was the day she met me she should have fell in love with me, but personally, it's just me. So this is the area that I take her to propose. Well, before the proposal, we are sitting at the table. We're sitting outdoors for, it's summertime. So we're sitting outside. And the waiter comes up and says, "Oh, are you ready? I'll take your drink order or whatever you want if you're ready to order now." He's standing next to me. My wife is sitting across the table from me. My fiance, not even my fiance at the time, actually just a girlfriend. And I'm looking, and we both look at her waiting for her to order. And she jumps up like somebody whacked her with something.
Yeah.
Like, just straight out, like baseball bat slammed her in the back. She jumped straight up and she goes, "Oh my God, what was that?" Now, we're both facing at her like I'm facing at you right now.
Yeah.
Clearly, we could see if anything passed behind her. Nothing. Not anything falling from the tree above us, not a bird going by. And she is freaked out.
Yeah.
The waiter and I are just kind of like looking at each other, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, I'm proposing to this woman, and she's crazy."
She's a loony.
But we're sitting there, and a couple minutes later, I'm sitting there, and I hear what sounds like boots, like brogans, running on the bricks. Now, there's a table with little kids sitting behind us.
Yeah.
These little sons of bitches have been up and down the entire time we've been there. Like, if I was their parent, I would be embarrassed to have these children outside because they were running around this restaurant. Now, you're outside at a restaurant, so it's not a big deal. But the servers are trying to bring food to other tables, and these children are weaving in and out of them. They were real children. They weren't ghost children.
Yeah. They should have been thrown in the orphanage to be sodomized.
Yeah, they should have been. So I'm looking at it. I'm sitting there, and I just hear this sound. I'm thinking it's these little kids again.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking I'm planning on proposing at some point during this dinner, and I know where I want to go, and I hope these little bastards don't run into it.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like turn my head, and over my left shoulder I look, and I can see the kids are sitting at the table. So I turn to my right. Slowly I turn.
Yeah.
And I look, and I saw, from the waist down, people running down the brick walkway. I just quickly turned back around, looking at the table, looking at it. And I must have had a look on my face of like, "Oh my God, what did I just see?"
Yeah.
Because she looks at me and she goes, "What is it?" And I'm like, "Nothing." She's like, "What did you just see?" I'm like, "Nothing." She's like, "You definitely don't look like your normal self."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "I'll talk to you about it later." Figuring if she said no to the proposal, I was just going to be like, "I'll never talk to her again." But she said yes. I proposed to her. She laughs at me. She actually laughed when I proposed. I throw this up all the time. It's a horrible story. She actually starts giggling. Nothing crushes a man's ego like, "Will you marry me?" Like she was about to say no or something. I was like,
better than her laughing when you pull your pants down.
"Oh, she cried when I pulled my pants down." And so I do all this proposal stuff. We have this nice dinner. She says yes. I go out front to call my friend to tell him, "Hey, she said yes."
Hey, I signed my soul to Satan, right?
Yeah, second time. And I'm waiting for her now, going on about 10 minutes. She was going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what is taking her so long? Like, if she was going to call people, just come back out front and call people with me. Stand there. I finally walk back up the brick walkway on the outside of the house to where the maitre d' area is and then where the bathrooms are. And I see her talking to the waiter. And I said to her, "So what's going on?" She goes, "The door won't open." So what do you mean the door won't open? She said, "The door just won't open. There's nobody in there."
The door to the bathroom.
Yeah. The problem with the door to the bathroom is it's not a handle lock like you could lock the door and close it behind you.
Yeah.
It's a switch lock where you push, like you close the door and you slide it, the old bolt locks.
Yeah, yeah.
You slide it and close it. You can't slide one of those closed from outside of there. You have to be inside the room to do that.
Yeah.
They're standing there for about 4 or 5 minutes after I come up at this point, and she's like, she's about to use the men's room just to get done,
Yeah.
and randomly bump the door, and the door flies open. Now this is after 3 or 4 people are pulling on the door, pushing on the door, trying to get it to open. It won't open.
Huh.
She goes to the bathroom. I'm talking to the guy who works at the maitre d' there, and he says, "This happens all the time." He goes, "This is normal." He goes, "That's why none of us freak out about it." He goes, "I've been locked in the bathroom here with the bolt open and not been able to pull the door back to get out."
No, that's weird.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of stories there, and that's just on the outside of the building. These aren't like even getting into the spirits in the building. So there's a little bit with Walter there from what I see. But I start to tend to disbelieve the Walter story a lot of times too. Okay, I did a double-blind study here. I took 2 women. Okay, now Walter's a Confederate. He basically is a chauvinist, hates women. So I took a white woman and a black woman, took them into the tavern at different times, and said, just start berating this guy. Call him by name, antagonize him. See what happens. Girl goes in, first girl, subject A, white woman, goes in and does it. Nothing. Subject B goes in, it's a black woman, goes in, berates him. Nothing. Now you're telling me this goes to hates women, is a Confederate. You're going to send a black woman in there, and he's not going to respond at all.
Yeah.
Because he's supposedly so malicious and so horrible and does all these mean, nasty things, and you send the perfect target in there, and he does nothing.
Yeah.
So I just don't know if I believe the Walter story a lot of times. I think that's one of these stories made to sell ghost tours.
Yeah.
Because I've already heard, Walter now moves. Walter's been seen at the Rupp House, which is about 2 doors up, 3 doors up.
And supposedly this Walter, I can't remember where I heard the story, but went home with somebody that was like that they were there on vacation, and they went home, and I don't know, I guess the person was a non-believer or something, then they go home and all this weird stuff started happening.
Yeah, I've heard stories about Walter doing that. I think you're actually referring to a story I told you about one of the people I know that does the ghost tours there. He kind of started out in the same boat as Neil. He's a reenactor.
Mm.
He did not believe in paranormal until he happened to find on a battlefield. He was actually in the movie Gods and Generals as one of the reenactors. He told me some cool stories about that. I don't know if they're true or not, but he's told me stories about that. He had found a belt buckle from North Carolina on one of the battlefields, and he took it home with him. And he's a history major at this point in college. So his bedroom he's a Civil War, that's his thing.
Yeah.
His bedroom has generals' photos on the walls, maps. He has pictures of different generals and stuff like that all over his room. And he comes home the first time, and he goes up in his room, and all the Union generals' pictures that were on this table are laid face down.
Mm.
And he goes down to his mom and says, "Mom, well, why were you in my room? Honey, I was in your room." And he still lives at home. He's in college. He's young in college.
Yeah.
And she's like, "I wasn't in your room." So a couple days goes by. There's a picture of General Reynolds in a frame sitting on the table. He comes home one day, and it looks like a bullet hole in the glass of the picture frame. Now, General Reynolds was shot at the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
He says, "Mom, what happened?" She's like, "I haven't been in your room." Finally, about 3 or 4 times stuff goes on. His mom is in the room finally putting his laundry away. The bed is on one side, and his dresser's on the other side. She is taking laundry from the basket on the bed, turning, putting it in the dresser, and then turning back around. She turns, puts socks in the sock drawer, turns back around to get more. When she turns back around, all the picture frames, she could hear picture frames sliding. They were all laid face down when she turned around.
Hmm.
Stuff would fall off the walls. He told me a story about one of his friends that didn't believe in paranormal. They went out ghost hunting. She went with. She called him screaming on the way home because there was a ghost
In her car.
in her car behind her. She'd see it in the rearview mirror crystal clear of a soldier sitting in the car behind her. I think that's the story you're referring to.
Yeah. And there was another one too. It was similar to the last one about your friend's bedroom, where I think somebody had found an artifact, took it home with them, and they had a little diorama, whatever you want, of the battlefield, and something kept repositioning the little soldiers that were in it, and then they'd like go back and they'd set them back the way that they thought they were set up, and then, next day they come back, they're all in a different way.
Yeah, I remember that story. And I think that was just a random house. It was one of the Civil War era houses in Gettysburg. One of the guys had a diorama.
Yeah, and I think his wife walked into the room and she saw the ghost of a soldier repositioning them the way they should be.
Yeah, she basically kept getting blamed for doing this.
Yeah.
And she's like, honey, I don't touch your stupid toys.
Yeah.
And that's how she was.
She has her own toys in the drawer of the nightstand.
And she was basically like, and she kept getting blamed for it. So one day she's in there dusting, and she said she saw this bright light, and out of the wall steps this guy in a gray uniform with this big beard, and he looks at this table, and like she said, he basically just reaches down and takes one whole regiment of these the old metal Civil War action
die-cast soldiers.
Yeah, die-cast soldiers. He took a whole regiment and just moved it to the side of a hill, and this was a topographic version of a diorama.
Yeah.
So he moved it to the one side of the hill, held his hands together, looked at it, shook his head yes, turned around, walked walked basically back into the wall.
Yeah.
She told her husband, I guess, he goes on to research more, and I guess a book came out a few years after that basically corrected one of the former points of contention of where this regiment was during the battle. And basically, according to what this spirit was doing, was he was moving it to the right spot.
Huh.
So that's
awesome.
Yeah, some of the stuff that you have in just random houses that people own that are old Civil War era houses.
I was just checking the kerosene heater. I'm freezing. Just seeing if it went out.
No, we're good.
One thing, folks, that you guys got to take into consideration here is we are actually, the last 3 shows that we've recorded have been recorded in a building that is haunted. Excuse me. I'm drinking soda. I've lived in this place before, and Chad's lived in this place many, many years, and it is a very old structure. So when you're listening to this show, pay an extra special attention to see if you could hear anything in the background at all. And believe me, nothing is staged. If you hear anything, get in touch with us and let us know. So, let's check our time here. I'll make sure we don't go over on our show slot here.
Yeah, we're way over on time right now.
All right. Well, on that note, let's wrap it up. Again, my name is Les Sinkavage, and joined with me as always is Chad Charlesworth, and our special guest tonight is Mr. Neil Smith, close friend, fellow researcher, and reenactor of the Battle of Gettysburg. So we want to thank him again for being here. Thank you, Neil.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We'd actually like to extend the invitation to Neil anytime we discuss paranormal topics and even cryptozoology that he's interested in. We'd really like to have him on the air with us.
Yeah, absolutely, because I know we're planning a Goatman special.
Nice.
Yeah, so you'll be there with an axe and a urinal.
Oh, man, I love Goatman.
Yeah, so, Neil will be joining us from time to time. Les and I will always be the host, and Neil will be our special guest correspondent.
Yeah, live on the field with Goatman. All right, folks. Well, you have yourself a good one, and thanks for listening.
Good night.
Yeah, good night.
What is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.